You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. The past year felt like a blur of bad decisions and bad luck. I had been blindsided by losing my job as a foreman after the bankruptcy of a major developer. One moment I was overseeing projects, leading teams, and making decisions. The next, I was staring at a screen full of job postings, feeling every ounce of my confidence evaporate. Clara's career, though, was on the upswing. It was hard not to feel the weight of it, watching her rise from account manager to vice president at her design firm, while I struggled to make sense of my next steps. Every day was a tug of war between pride and panic, and Clara, too absorbed in her work, didn't notice how deep I was sinking. At first, her jokes about me being the full-time grill master were lighthearted. She'd laugh and say it with a twinkle in her eye, like she wasn't trying to wound me. But after a while, it wasn't funny anymore. They felt more like jabs, subtle but sharp. I tried to brush it off. I didn't want to be the guy who let it bother him, but I wasn't stupid. I heard the way she said, "Don't spend all your allowance in one place," when we were with friends. I could feel the silent judgment in her words, even though she never came right out and said it. It didn't matter that I had made more money than most of her colleagues back in the day, or that my hands had built things. To Clara, I was just a guy who used to run a construction crew, and now I was the guy who stayed home, cleaning and running errands, while she kept climbing the corporate ladder. There were days when I confronted her about it, asking her, honestly, if she thought I was a failure. One night, I asked her straight out after she made a remark about me not fitting in at one of her work functions. "It's just teasing," she said, waving me off with a laugh. But I didn't think it was, not anymore. I kept the frustration buried. It was easier that way. I'd find freelance carpentry jobs here and there, but I didn't tell her. There was no point in bringing it up, no point in letting her feel the weight of my struggle. I kept it to myself, building an independent client base quietly, one piece of furniture at a time. But Ethan, Clara's junior manager, he had a way of sensing things. It wasn't long before he cornered me in the kitchen one night after the barbecue. I was wiping down the counters when he slid in, the door closing behind him softly. "Mark," he started, and I froze, my hand still gripping the dishcloth. "I've been meaning to tell you something. I don't know if Clara ever mentioned it, but the company has been looking for someone with your skill set." I stiffened, trying not to let the shock show. "What do you mean?" "Someone for construction management. A senior role, overseeing a new division," Ethan said, his voice quieter now, his eyes flicking toward the living room, as if to make sure no one else was listening. "You'd be a perfect fit. I could pass your resume to the team." My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to keep calm. "Clara said they weren't hiring when I applied months ago." I almost couldn't stop the bitterness in my voice, though. "Guess I was wrong." Ethan gave a tight nod. She was right about that at the time, but things have changed. I didn't want to say anything, but I can make the introduction if you're interested." I felt a surge of anger flood through me. Anger at Clara for holding me back, for not telling me about this opportunity, for keeping me in the dark while she rose higher in her career. But I also felt a glimmer of hope. This could be my way back in. "I'll think about it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, not wanting him to see how much this offer stirred in me. "Just let me know," Ethan said before turning to leave. "But don't mention it to Clara yet. She'll be in the loop soon enough." The word "soon enough" stung. I wasn't sure what had changed, but I was sure of one thing. Ethan didn't want to step on Clara's toes. He was treading lightly, as if walking around an open minefield. As soon as the door clicked shut behind him, I stood there for a moment, the reality of it all hitting me. Clara had kept me from this opportunity, deliberately or not. How many others had slipped through my fingers because of her? Because of the way she kept me in this safe little box while she got to chase her own ambitions? But I knew I couldn't confront her about this, not yet. Not without knowing more about what was really going on. I needed to keep my head clear and make a plan, something independent of her. So, I shoved the anger down, focused on the quiet hum of the kitchen, the low murmur of voices in the living room. I thought about the months ahead and how I might finally take control of my own career again. And in that moment, I made a decision. This was my chance. I wasn't going to wait for Clara to decide what my future looked like anymore. It was hard to ignore the way Clara's guests treated me at the barbecue. I'd spent hours getting everything ready, making sure the ribs were perfect, setting up the lighting, and arranging drinks for people I barely knew. But the moment Clara walked in with her team, it was like I was invisible. They talked over me, laughed without acknowledging my presence, as if I was just part of the furniture. Clara's joke about me being the full-time grill master since the big career pause wasn't funny. It was her usual way of poking fun at me, shoving me into a role I didn't ask for, didn't want. It stung more than it should have, but I didn't show it. I had learned a long time ago that letting it out only made things worse. The group laughed, the sound hollow and forced. But then I spoke up, calm and smooth, as always. Actually, I'm rebuilding my construction business, I said, my voice steady but firm. I've been freelancing and taking on carpentry projects, while running the house so Clara can focus on her career. The room fell silent. Clara's smile faltered for a moment, and I saw the tension creep in. She quickly tried to downplay it, tossing out a weak laugh to redirect everyone's attention. But I could tell something had shifted. They knew. Later, after the guests had left, I was cleaning up in the kitchen when Ethan slipped in. He had been quiet all evening, hanging back while the others had their laughs. His voice was lower than usual when he spoke, careful, like he didn't want to make any waves. "I overheard you earlier, Mark," he said, stepping closer. "Look, I don't know if Clara's told you, but the company has been looking for someone with your skills. I can pass your resume along to the right people in construction partnerships if you want." I froze for a second. I'd applied months ago, but Clara had told me flat out they weren't hiring. She had dismissed it without hesitation, and here was Ethan, suggesting something different. My chest tightened. "Thanks, Ethan," I said, masking the surprise. "But Clara told me there weren't any openings." Ethan gave a slight shrug, his eyes avoiding mine. "Yeah, well, things have changed. There's a project coming up, and you'd be perfect for it. But, don't mention it to Clara yet. She's not really aware of this yet." The feeling that had been building in my chest, of being left out, held back, boiled over. Clara had blocked me from this opportunity without even telling me. I wasn't sure whether it was intentional or just another one of her passive decisions, but it was clear now that she had never seen me as someone worthy of moving forward. "Got it," I said, even though my mind was racing. Ethan didn't stay much longer after that, leaving me alone with the weight of his words. It wasn't just that I had lost my job a year ago. It was everything that had followed, the way Clara had dismissed me, the way she acted like my struggles didn't matter. But now, knowing this, I realized I was stuck. She wasn't going to help me get back on my feet, and I didn't think she even saw that I was trying. Later that night, I sat on the couch, texting my mom. I told her about the barbecue, about Ethan's offer, and about how Clara treated me in front of her coworkers. She responded almost immediately, her words a reminder of something I'd known deep down. "Don't let her walk all over you, Mark," she texted. "You've always been more than this. Don't let her hold you back. You're not just her support system." I set the phone down and thought about that. It had been too easy to let Clara take the reins, to let her career come first. Maybe I'd let that happen because I didn't know how to find my own way again, after losing everything I'd worked for. But I couldn't keep doing this, being her silent partner. I needed to regain my footing, and for the first time in a long time, I knew I had to take control. The next morning, I went to the bank and opened a separate account for my freelance work, a place where Clara wouldn't have access, where I could start building something for myself again. It felt good to make that decision, like a small but important step toward regaining my independence. By the time Clara came home that night, I had already made another move. She was still glowing from her day at the office, probably with another round of praise from her coworkers. She breezed in, hardly acknowledging me as I sat at the kitchen table. "Mark," she said, her tone casual but expectant, "I need you to be extra charming to these clients I'm meeting tomorrow. You know, show them a good time." I didn't answer right away. My hands were steady as I folded the napkins from the barbecue, slowly, deliberately. "Why don't you show them a good time yourself?" I finally said, the words coming out cooler than I intended. Clara didn't seem to notice the edge in my voice. She leaned over the counter, her tone turning businesslike. "Just don't mention your freelance work," she added, almost too casually. "It's confusing. You know how people are. We need to keep things neat and tidy." Neat and tidy. That was the thing. Clara liked the world in its perfect little box. One where she was in control, where everything fit neatly into her narrative. The more she said that, the more I realized how tightly she wanted to control everything, even how others saw me. She didn't want me to be seen as anything but her support, her full-time grill master, and I hated it. I hated the way she tried to shape my image, as though my work didn't matter. I stood up, pushing the chair back with more force than necessary. "I'm not your puppet, Clara," I said, my voice sharp. "I'm not going to pretend I don't have my own life." Her smile faltered, but she quickly masked it with that practiced look of hers, the one that said everything was fine, even if it wasn't. She shrugged. "I'm just saying, keep it low-key. It's easier this way." I felt the anger twist tighter in my gut, but I didn't give in to it, not yet. "I'll do what I want," I said, my voice quieter but still firm. "And don't expect me to hide everything I'm doing just because you think it's confusing." Clara stayed silent for a moment, the tension in the room thick and palpable. She didn't like that. She didn't like being challenged. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I couldn't shake the tension from the barbecue, the way Ethan had slid in with that quiet offer, the offer Clara had never mentioned. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. It wasn't just about the job. It was about how Clara had kept me in the dark, how she'd blocked me from opportunities, and how she treated me like a ghost in my own home. I had to tell her I wasn't going to let this slide, not anymore. A few days later, after I'd done my best to keep things civil, Clara and I finally sat down to talk. She was busy with work as usual, but I knew I had to make this moment count. I needed to stop hiding, stop letting her make decisions for me. This was the breaking point. "I'm taking the subcontracting contract in Austin," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'm leaving next month." She blinked at me, not quite understanding at first. "Austin?" Her voice dropped a little, confusion furrowing her brow. "What are you talking about? You never mentioned anything about this." "I didn't think I needed to," I replied, swallowing back the frustration. "I got an offer from Ethan's team. I'm going for it." I saw her face shift then. Her expression darkened, her hand tightening around the mug she was holding. "Ethan? Since when has that become something you want to pursue?" "Mark, I've been talking to him for a while now," I interrupted, meeting her gaze. "He's been offering me opportunities in construction partnerships for months. I guess you missed that, didn't you?" Clara opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence between us thickened. I saw the hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't going to just roll over like she usually did. She would fight for control, the way she always did. "I didn't know you were applying for that," Clara finally said, her voice thin, almost defensive. I could feel my heart thudding harder, the frustration rising. "You never told me about the opening," I shot back. "You told me your company wasn't hiring, but here's the truth, Clara. There was a job for me, and you kept it from me." She opened her mouth again, but it was clear she was scrambling for something to say. It would have been awkward, don't you think?" Her voice trailed off, trying to find some reason to justify what she'd done. I blinked, stunned by the lack of remorse in her words. "Awkward? You blocked me from a job because it was awkward?" "Clara, this isn't about awkwardness. You kept me from a chance to work, to rebuild my career. What else was I supposed to think?" Her eyes darted away like she couldn't meet my gaze anymore. She stayed silent for a few moments, long enough for the weight of everything to settle between us. But still, she didn't apologize. She didn't offer an explanation. "I'm not going to talk about this anymore," she said finally, her voice sharper now, almost dismissive. "It's done." "No, Clara," I replied, my voice cutting through her attempt to shut me down. "It's not done. You've been controlling everything about my life for the last year, and I've let you. But not anymore." She froze, her eyes flickering between anger and disbelief. "What are you saying? Are you seriously going to throw this all away? Everything we've worked for?" "Everything you worked for," I corrected her, the words tasting bitter. "You never saw me, not really. You never saw how hard I worked to support us both. You never saw me as someone who deserved a chance to grow. You only saw me as an extension of your life, a convenient way to make things easier." Clara blinked, as though she hadn't expected me to stand up for myself this time. She opened her mouth to say something else, but stopped short, her voice faltering. "I need time to think," she finally muttered, more to herself than to me. She picked up her phone, typing furiously as if that could somehow block out the reality of what I was saying. I walked away from her, a calmness settling over me that I hadn't felt in months. I had finally said it all, the things I'd kept inside. It was a relief, even if Clara couldn't handle it. The next morning, the conversation still hung in the air. Clara was distant, and I could see the tension in her body as she moved around the kitchen. But I didn't want to let this drag on. It was time to make my own decisions. That afternoon, I sent my resume to Ethan. I bypassed Clara completely. No more waiting for her permission, no more waiting for her to decide what my future looked like. This was mine to own, and I wasn't going to let her control it anymore. As I hit send, I felt a sense of empowerment. There was no going back. Whatever happened next, I was taking charge of my life. Later that night, I texted my mother, updating her on the situation. She responded with a simple but sharp message. People show their true selves when they have power. I knew exactly what she meant. Clara had made her position clear, and it was up to me to decide what to do with it. I put my phone down and looked around the apartment. Clara was already planning her next move, but I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let her decisions rule my life anymore. The next step was mine to take, and I wasn't going to let anyone stop me. The day of the interview, I woke up earlier than usual, feeling a rush of energy I hadn't felt in a while. I had prepared meticulously, brushing up on everything about Clara's firm, their current projects, and the direction they were headed. This was more than just a chance for a job. It felt like a shot at reclaiming something I had lost, something I had buried in the mess of my marriage with Clara. I dressed carefully, not too flashy, but sharp enough to make an impression. When I walked into their office building, I felt the weight of it all. The clean-cut professionals in their tailored suits, the pristine glass walls, and the buzz of a company that was always moving forward. For the first time in a while, I felt like I was part of something, like I was standing on solid ground. The interview itself went better than I could have expected. I spoke confidently, answering their questions, sharing my experience. They were engaged, nodding as I laid out my background in construction management, the projects I had led, the teams I had built. I talked about the downturn in the market, how I pivoted and began working freelance, building my own client base. There was no hesitation in my voice. This was my turf, and I was owning it. Afterward, as I was walking out of the building, my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "Hey Mark, just wanted to let you know. There's a possibility of an upcoming director-level role with a new division. It would be a step up, but I'll warn you, being in Clara's orbit could complicate things." I read the message 3 times, the weight of his words sinking in. A director role. The very thing I'd been hoping for. But Ethan's warning stuck with me. Clara's orbit. That meant navigating through all the politics at her firm. It meant standing up to her, likely even against her. I didn't have a choice, though. If I wanted to rebuild, I had to take this shot. But as I walked to my car, I felt the weight of the decision settle on me. I hadn't told Clara about this interview. The idea of her knowing didn't sit well with me. I didn't want her influence over this, not anymore. I needed to be clear with myself first. The job wasn't just about the title or the paycheck. It was about carving out my own space, away from her control. No more hidden freelance projects. No more silently supporting her while my own career floundered. This was my turn to step up. The next few days felt like a blur. I kept the news to myself, not telling Clara anything. I didn't want to bring up the role with her until I had more answers, until it was a done deal. She was already too involved in every aspect of my life. If I told her now, I could already hear her asking questions, giving advice, maybe even discouraging me from pursuing it. I wasn't ready for that. By the time I got the call from Ethan, I was on edge, unsure of what the next move would be. I had gotten used to waiting for Clara's reaction to things, to letting her steer decisions. This time, though, it was different. I didn't care what she thought. "Mark, it looks like the position's yours. The director role is open, and you're their top candidate. But listen," Ethan's voice was quieter now. "Clara has to approve all hires at this level, and knowing her, she's probably going to push back." That hit harder than I expected. Clara had the final say. She always did. The idea of her blocking me again, this time in a public way, made my stomach twist. "I won't let that stop me," I said, my voice sharp with newfound resolve. "Thanks, Ethan. I appreciate it." We hung up, and for a moment, I stood there, staring at the empty street. Clara's veto power. That was the reality. She could stop this. She had the power to keep me from moving forward, from finally reclaiming my life. But I wasn't going to let her. Not anymore. I could already feel the tension building in my chest. I knew I had to tell her about this job. It wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when, and I couldn't let her control how I felt about it. She had manipulated the narrative for too long, pushed me down while she rose higher. But this time, I wasn't going to let her control the story. The next few days were a blur of meetings and decisions, but I knew I couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. Clara was working late one evening, sitting at her desk when I walked into the room. "Clara," I began, feeling the words settle heavy in my throat. "There's something I need to tell you. I've been offered a director-level role at the firm in Austin. They want me to head up a new division." Her head snapped up, her expression faltering for a moment. "What? When were you going to tell me this?" I took a deep breath. I didn't want to say anything until it was finalized. "But it's real, Clara, and I'm taking it." She blinked, the silence stretching between us as she processed the words. Wow, I didn't know you even applied for that." "I didn't," I said, my voice steady. "It wasn't something I thought I'd have a chance at, but now it's happening." The room was quiet for a beat too long. Then she cleared her throat, and I saw the shift. "I thought you were happy here, with everything we've built." "I'm happy with the chance to finally move forward," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I'm not just your backup anymore, Clara. I need this for myself." The tension in her face tightened, but she didn't argue, at least not immediately. She stood up slowly, walking over to me. "This is all so sudden," she said, her voice softer now, but not apologetic. "Are you sure about this? It's going to be a big change for both of us." I could feel the old patterns creeping back in, the guilt, the self-doubt, but I pushed them away. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "I've thought about this a lot." Clara didn't speak for a moment, but I saw her eyes narrow as the weight of my words sank in. It was clear she wasn't happy with it, wasn't thrilled about losing control over this part of my life. But I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. "This is the right move for me, Clara," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "And I'm doing it whether you're on board or not." Her gaze hardened, and she stepped back, crossing her arms. "I just think you're rushing into this," she said, her tone laced with something that felt more like a warning than concern. But I wasn't going to be swayed by her doubts this time. "I'm not rushing into anything. I'm finally taking control of my life again," I said, my words firm. For a long moment she didn't respond, and the weight of our silence spoke louder than anything either of us could say. The days leading up to Clara's firm's charity gala were filled with meticulous preparation, the kind that only she could handle. She was in her element, perfectly poised, her focus razor sharp. Me? I was just the background noise, playing my part in the drama she'd orchestrated. She spent hours telling me what to wear, how to behave, how to present myself, as if I was some accessory for the night. I wasn't surprised. I'd long since given up on questioning her need for control. But this time, I wasn't going to be the obedient husband who just followed along. "You need to look the part," she said one morning, as if I'd be walking into the event with a cardboard cutout for a personality. "We want to impress the right people." The right people. Her colleagues, the ones who always smiled at me with a kind of detached politeness, but never truly acknowledged the work I'd done in the background. The ones who laughed behind closed doors at my expense. "I'll look fine," I said, keeping my tone neutral, but inside, I felt that familiar stir of resentment. I could play the part, just like I always had. But this time, I wasn't going to let her rewrite the script. I had my own life to lead now. As the night of the gala drew closer, Clara's instructions became more pointed. "Don't embarrass me," she said once casually, but I could hear the edge in her voice. "And don't mention your freelance work. It's confusing. We don't need that complication tonight." It was becoming clearer by the day. Clara wanted to keep me hidden in the background, to maintain the illusion that she was the one in control of everything. She didn't want the people she worked with to see me as anything more than an accessory, a stay-at-home husband in her story. It wasn't about my work or my achievements. It was about her image and how she wanted people to see us. The night of the gala, I walked into the venue, looking sharp in the suit she'd picked out for me, my tie just a little too tight, my shoes a little too polished. I could already feel the weight of the room, the people who would glance over at me, nod politely, and then turn away without a second thought. But that was fine. I wasn't here to make friends. Clara immediately disappeared into the crowd, chatting with executives, rubbing elbows with clients, and reminding everyone of just how important she was. I stood off to the side, nursing a drink, my mind wandering as I watched her glide through the room. Her confidence was as sharp as ever, But the more I watched her, the more I realized how little it had to do with me. That's when Ethan found me. He was a little too eager, a little too careful, and I couldn't blame him. Being around Clara for too long had a way of making everyone tread lightly. "Mark," he said, lowering his voice as he approached, "I wanted to let you know, after our conversation the other day, the director role in the partnerships team is pretty much yours. But there's a catch." He paused, looking around, as if waiting for Clara to show up. "What kind of catch?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "You know how Clara has the final say on hires at her level, right?" he said, his words measured. "Well, that includes you. If you accept this role, it'll put you directly in her orbit, and it might get complicated. I just wanted to give you a heads up." I took a long drink, processing what he was saying. Clara had the power to block me if she wanted, the same Clara who'd blocked me from opportunities before, who treated me like a secondary character in her life. The thought of working with her, under her supervision, sent a chill down my spine. I smiled at Ethan, but it wasn't a smile of gratitude. It was a smile of resolve. "Thanks, Ethan. I'm not going to let her stop me from moving forward." Ethan nodded, his gaze flicking back to Clara across the room. "Just don't say I didn't warn you." "I won't," I replied, my voice low. "But I'm doing this for me, not her." The tension in my chest deepened, but it wasn't just from the political maneuvering at Clara's company. It was the realization that I was finally stepping into my own world, one that didn't revolve around her. But the cost of that freedom? It was something I wasn't entirely prepared for. I found myself scanning the room, looking for Clara. She was deep in conversation with some clients, smiling that practiced smile of hers, the one that made everything seem effortless. I could feel my resolve hardening. She didn't get to control this part of my life anymore. But as I stood there, I realized something else. As much as Clara had pulled the strings over the years, as much as I had let her, this wasn't just about taking control of my career. It was about taking control of my life. Before I could lose my nerve, I walked over to her, deliberately forcing myself to keep my movement steady. When I reached her, she paused mid-sentence, her eyes flicking to me, but she didn't say anything at first. "I've decided to accept the role," I said, my voice low enough that only she could hear. "The one in Austin." Her smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "What do you mean, accept it? I thought we were still figuring this out." "No," I said, meeting her eyes directly. "I've made up my mind." For a brief second, her face tightened, but she quickly masked it. "Well, I guess if that's what you want." She shrugged, her tone casual, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. "Just make sure you're not rushing into anything." "I'm not," I said, my voice firm. "But I am making this decision for myself, not for you, not for anyone else." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't happy about it. She didn't want to lose control over me, over my career. But the truth was I wasn't hers to control anymore. "I'll get the details sorted out," I said, turning to walk away. And just like that, I stepped away from the life she had built around me. No more hiding in the background. No more pretending to be something I wasn't. As I walked into the crowd, the weight of my decision settled in. I didn't need Clara's approval to be who I was meant to be. The rest of the night played out in a blur, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The work wasn't over, but I had finally taken the first real step toward rebuilding. The tension in the air at the gala was thick enough to cut with a knife. Clara was at the center of the room, as always, laughing, shaking hands, effortlessly making herself the focal point. I was still standing off to the side, nursing a drink, trying to blend into the background the way she always wanted me to. But the more I watched her, the more I felt the knot in my stomach tightening. The final straw came during her speech. She was introducing the company's founder, standing on that stage in front of all her colleagues, acting like she was the one holding everything together. She was flawless. She was in her element, perfectly polished and poised, surrounded by all the people who adored her. And then I remembered something. Something I'd heard through the grapevine from Ethan's assistant, Maya. Clara had made a joke about me at work, one of her usual little digs. She'd referred to me as her in-house handyman in front of their entire team, a joke that I could only assume made her feel superior in front of her colleagues. I couldn't do it anymore. The humiliation, the little slights, the constant undermining, no more. When Clara stepped off the stage, beaming with that fake, practiced smile of hers, I was already moving. I caught her in the hallway outside the ballroom, away from the crowd, but not far enough to avoid anyone hearing us if things got loud. "Clara," I said, my voice low but steady, "we need to talk." She gave me a tired smile, like she'd already heard this 100 times. "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something important. Number, this can't wait." I stepped closer, the anger rising in my chest like a furnace. "I've had enough of this, of everything. The way you've been treating me, blocking my opportunities, making jokes about me in front of your colleagues. It's over." Her smile faltered for a second, but she quickly masked it with a cold, indifferent look. "What are you talking about? You know how much pressure I'm under. I don't need this right now." "I don't care how much pressure you're under," I snapped. "You've been using that as an excuse to control me, to treat me like I'm nothing more than your sidekick. You've blocked me from every opportunity I've had to move forward, first with that job at your company and now this." Her eyes narrowed. "You're not making sense, Mark. What are you saying?" "I'm saying I've had enough." I looked her in the eye, letting my words land. "I'm done being the invisible man in your life. I've accepted a director role with the Austin subcontractor. I'm leaving." Her expression shifted, a flash of surprise before her face went cold. "You're leaving?" Her voice dropped, barely a whisper, like she couldn't quite believe it. "Yeah, I'm leaving. I'm done with all of this," I said, gesturing to the grand ballroom behind her. "I'm not your accessory anymore. I'm not going to be the guy who supports you from the sidelines while you take everything and give nothing back." Her eyes flicked around, as if looking for some way to regain control. "You don't know what you're doing," she said, her tone clipped, defensive. "This is all going to blow up in your face. You won't get this opportunity if you burn every bridge you've got here." "I'm not burning bridges, Clara," I shot back. "I'm walking away from a toxic situation. And if you think this won't be good for me, you're wrong. It's time for me to live my life for myself." Her face twisted, her jaw tight. "This is ridiculous. You're being dramatic, and you're throwing everything away. We've built a life here, Mark. You don't just walk away from that." I wasn't sure if it was the anger or the weight of everything I'd been holding in for so long, but the words slipped out before I could stop them. "I don't want to be part of this life anymore, Clara. I don't want to live in your shadow anymore." Her expression darkened, the control slipping away. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. "You think you can just walk away from everything we've built? From me?" She leaned in, her voice tight. "You think you'll have anything when I'm done with you?" That was it, the threat. The moment I realized how deep this was going, it wasn't about me leaving her. It was about her trying to destroy me because she couldn't control me anymore. I stared at her, holding her gaze, refusing to flinch. "Go ahead," I said, my voice unwavering. "Threaten my career. It won't stop me. I'm not your pawn anymore." She froze for a moment, the finality of my words landing between us. The power struggle was over, and it felt good. "You're making a huge mistake," Clara finally said, but the venom had left her voice. It was just exhaustion now. I gave her one last look. "I don't think I am." Turning away, I walked out of the hallway and into the ballroom, the sound of her heels clicking behind me. I could feel the eyes of the guests on me as I passed, but I didn't care. It was over. For the first time in a long time, I was making my own choices, and no one, especially not Clara, was going to take that away from me. As I stepped into the cool night air, I didn't feel relief, not yet, but I did feel something else, freedom. It was mine for the taking, and this time, I was going to grab it. The first few days after leaving Clara were strange. I moved in with my parents temporarily, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I needed space to think without her looming over everything. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't home, but it was a clean slate. Austin was still looming ahead in my mind, but there were 1,000 little things to take care of first. Getting my feet under me again. The new job at the subcontractor was a lifeline, a chance to prove to myself that I wasn't just someone who existed in someone else's shadow. I hadn't told Claire about the director role yet, but I was sure it would hit her like a ton of bricks once it was official, and it would be official soon. I reconnected with a few old friends, the ones I hadn't seen much of in years. It felt good, like I was reclaiming pieces of myself I'd lost in the years of living for Clara. We'd grab beers, talk about things other than work, or Clara's constant ambition. It was a relief to talk about real things again. I found a small apartment a few weeks later. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I could already feel the weight of the new chapter settling over me. I set up my new place slowly, new furniture, small changes, the kind of things I hadn't had time or energy for before. It felt like I was finally living, not just surviving. Clara and I didn't speak much after the gala. The silence was thick. The divorce process dragged on, tense but necessary. I was relieved it was happening, but I couldn't help but feel the odd pang of guilt sometimes. She'd been my partner for so long, and I hated that it had come to this, even though I knew it was the only way out. In the weeks that followed, I heard things. News trickled back to me through contacts. Her reputation at work was slipping. Clients were pulling out. Deadlines were slipping through the cracks. The whispers weren't loud enough to be damaging, but they were noticeable. People were noticing the things I'd kept in the background for years, the behind-the-scenes support, the late nights, the projects that had failed because Clara's focus was always on herself, her climb up the ladder. I couldn't feel satisfaction over that, though. I was free of her, and that was enough. I didn't wish her failure, but I didn't wish for her to succeed at my expense either. I kept my distance. I wasn't going to be drawn back into her world of manipulation, where I was only valuable as long as I was propping up her career. But the peace I'd found was always undercut by the fear that she might try to drag me back in, and I wasn't going to let her do that. One afternoon, as I sat in my new apartment going over some paperwork for work, my phone buzzed with a message from Maya. I hadn't heard from her in months. I half expected it to be about the ongoing mess with Clara's firm. "Mark, I just wanted to tell you. Clara was let go from her position. It's not official yet, but it's happening. It's been coming for a while. Clients pulling out, missed deadlines. She seemed really humbled when I ran into her today. She actually asked about you, said she regrets how things went down." My stomach churned. I didn't know what to feel. Relief? Sadness? I had no idea what had happened to Clara after everything fell apart. But now I knew it hadn't been easy. I didn't respond right away. There was nothing to say. Part of me was glad she had to face the consequences of her actions. But another part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, felt a strange ache, like I'd just watched a car crash happen in slow motion. A few days later, I ran into Maya at a coffee shop. She was looking at me carefully, as though waiting for me to react to the news. "So, Clara?" she asked, her voice tentative. I shook my head. "I don't know what to say about that." "She seemed genuine," Maya said quietly. She didn't say much, but she looked a little different, less sure of herself, less... She trailed off, as if searching for the right words. "I think she realizes what she lost." I looked out the window for a moment, taking it all in. Clara humbled. Clara realizing she had made a mess of everything. "I don't think she's going to come back from this," Maya continued. "Not in the same way. She seemed sorry, for what it's worth." I didn't know what to do with that. I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy for her, not after everything. But there was something else, a tiny flicker of something between regret and relief. "Maybe it's what she needs," I said finally, my voice distant. "To face it, to see the damage." Maya nodded. "It might be, but it's also the end of a whole chapter, for both of you." For a moment, I let the weight of that sink in. The chapter with Clara was over, for both of us. As I left the coffee shop that day, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt done. The last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, and with it, the final tie between me and Clara was untangled. That night, I sat in my small apartment, staring out at the city lights. I was free, but it was quieter than I'd expected. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't sad either. I was finally, truly free to move forward. Months passed, and I kept my head down, focusing on the new chapter I was building in Austin. The transition wasn't easy, moving away from the life Clara and I had shared for so long. But I had already made peace with the fact that I wasn't going back to her world, to the life we had built on her terms. I had a new job, new friends, and a fresh start. I felt lighter, even when the weight of everything I'd left behind lingered at the edges. Then Maya called one afternoon. I hadn't spoken to her since the gala, but when I saw her name pop up on my phone, I knew it wasn't going to be good news. "Hey Mark," she said, her voice hesitant. "I don't know if you've heard, but I thought you should know. Clara was let go from her position." The words hit me harder than I expected. I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the weight of it. Let go. The firm had finally cut her loose after everything that had gone wrong. It wasn't just the missed deadlines or the lost clients. It was all of it, the cracks I'd seen forming even before I left. "She's out?" I asked, not sure what I was feeling. Relief, sympathy, or maybe just the closure I didn't know I needed. "Yeah, it's official now," Maya said, her voice low. She didn't see it coming, but honestly, things have been pretty rough there for a while. She's been struggling to keep up, and I think it just became too much. I didn't know what to say. The part of me that still remembered the Clara who had once been driven and capable couldn't help but feel sorry for her. The woman who had always been in control, who had built her success by stepping on others, now faced the consequences of her own actions. She was humbled in a way I never imagined she would be. "Did she say anything about me?" I asked, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. "She did," Maya said carefully. "She mentioned you. It wasn't much, but she said she regretted how things went down between you two. She seemed a little defeated. She asked about you too, how you were doing." That hit me harder than I expected. Clara had asked about me. After everything, she wanted to know how I was. It felt like a strange, hollow victory. I didn't want to feel this way. Empathy for her, a woman who had made my life a living hell at times. But I couldn't ignore the flicker of emotion. "I'm sure she does," I said, my voice distant, not wanting to dig into my own feelings. "But that doesn't change anything." Maya was quiet for a moment before she spoke again. "Yeah, I get it. I don't think you should feel any guilt over it, though. You were right to walk away." "I know," I said, rubbing my hand over my face. It's weird, you know? After all that happened, to hear she's struggling like this." "You don't have to feel bad for her, Mark," Maya said, her tone firm. "She made her choices. You're not the one who got her fired, but if it means anything, she seemed genuinely sorry. She asked about you with a little more humility than I've ever seen from her." I sat in silence, processing the weight of it. I didn't know if Clara had truly changed, or if this was just another attempt to repair the damage, but the fact that she seemed genuinely humbled struck me. "I guess it's over then," I said finally, the realization settling in. "For both of us." "Yeah," Maya agreed. "But at least you're not carrying her baggage anymore. You're moving forward." I hung up the phone a few minutes later, feeling a strange mixture of closure and something else I couldn't quite place. I wasn't happy about her downfall, but I wasn't broken by it either. The part of me that had once wanted to make her see the damage she'd done, wanted her to regret how she treated me, was quiet now. I had my own life to live, and Clara's fall didn't change that. I pushed it out of my mind as best I could, focusing on the next steps in my own journey. I had a new team to lead in Austin, new projects to tackle. I wasn't going to let my past with Clara dictate how I moved forward. But as I sat there in my apartment that night, I couldn't help but think about the woman I used to know, the one who had it all, who was so determined to climb at any cost. I had left her behind, and in doing so, I had reclaimed myself. I didn't wish her harm, but I was done with her, done with the games, the manipulation, the constant reminder that I was always secondary in her world. I was free. The next day, as I walked into the office in Austin, I felt it again, that sense of possibility, of new beginnings. It was mine to grab, and no one was going to take it from me. I had no idea what Clara's next step would be, but for the first time in years, it didn't matter. I was finally living for myself, and nothing was going to take that away. It had been a few weeks since the dust settled on the divorce, and I was starting to find my rhythm. My apartment was small, but felt like a sanctuary. The city was growing on me, and the job in Austin, though demanding, was exactly what I needed to feel like I was moving forward, but I wasn't completely detached from everything that had happened. The ghost of my marriage still lingered in the background, even if I tried to push it away. I had just finished a long day at the office, heading into my kitchen to grab something to eat, when I noticed the email notification on my phone. It was from Clara. I didn't want to open it. I didn't need to. I had heard through the grapevine that she'd been working retail, after being let go from her firm. I didn't feel pity or relief. I just felt distant. She was no longer my responsibility. We had moved on, and I didn't owe her anything anymore, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the email, reading it slowly, as if waiting for the words to sink in. "Mark, I know it's been a while, but I wanted to take a moment to apologize. Not just for how things ended, but for how I treated you during your time of unemployment. I didn't see how much you were going through because I was too caught up in myself, in my career. I should have seen it. I should have supported you better. I failed you in that way. I've been working retail now, something I never thought I'd do. It's forced me to look at myself in a way I never had to before. I had to confront the pride and insecurity I had buried, and it's made me realize what I lost when I ignored you, when I pushed you aside. You deserved better. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just need you to know that I understand now. I see what I did, and I regret it. I was wrong, Mark, and I hope you can at least accept that. Take care of yourself. I hope you find peace, in whatever form that takes. The words hit me harder than I thought they would. I stared at the screen for a long time after finishing the email, the silence of the room pressing in around me. I wasn't angry. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I might. Maybe that's what I had been waiting for, to feel victorious in her failure. But instead, all I felt was relief. It wasn't a feeling I expected. Her apology wasn't some grand gesture of redemption. It wasn't a plea for me to come back into her life. It was just words. Words that didn't change anything, but somehow, they still meant something. I sat down at my kitchen table, the weight of it all finally sinking in. She saw it. She finally saw what she had done. She had recognized the harm she'd caused, and maybe, just maybe, it had taken her losing everything for her to understand. I didn't feel sorry for her, not anymore, but I felt a strange sense of closure. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from my mom, checking in as usual. I didn't need to respond right away, but I knew she'd be pleased to hear that I'd finally let go of the anger I'd been holding on to for so long. I clicked back to the email and read it again. It was simple, but it carried weight. It didn't change the past, and it didn't rewrite the ending of our story, but in some small way, it untangled the last of the emotional knots that had been holding me back. I closed the email, put the phone down, and leaned back in my chair. The final piece had fallen into place. There was no more resentment, no more anger. I didn't need to forgive her, but I was free, and that was all that mattered. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city below. The future was wide open, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally moving forward.